My name is Marianne Thieme and I'm a member of parliament for the Party for the Animals in the Netherlands. And our party is the very first in the world to champion the rights of non-humans in the national parliament. However, there are other problems in the world aside from animal welfare. So tonight I'm going to tell you some very hard truths about what we are doing to our planet. And I'm so pleased that you are ready to face up to these realities.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years.
The world is heating up fast and we have ourselves to blame.
Global warming is real, and we humans are almost certainly the cause.
Global warming, that's the world's greatest current concern. Everyone finds themselves in its grip, from scientists to politicians to the Secretary General of the UN and even Leonardo DiCaprio.
We face a convergence of crises. Industrial civilization has caused irreparable damage.
By the middle of the century, there may be 150 million environmental refugees.
Not only is it the 11th hour, it's 11:59.
But it's that other film, made by Nobel Prize winner Al Gore, which has truly succeeded in putting this global problem on the map. An Inconvenient Truth was a real wake-up call to the world. This was a great achievement for Al Gore. However, he forgot something rather important. The consequences of global warming are enormous. The climate researchers from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have estimated that by the year 2100, 1 to 3 billion people will be in dire need of fresh water. Hunger will increase throughout large parts of the globe. So it should come as no surprise that global warming is currently our foremost concern. Everyone who has seen Al Gore's film knows that our Earth is in bad shape. Greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced. This is on the agenda of every world leader. The causes of global warming must be dealt with now. And so, together we must identify the greatest emitters of greenhouse gases in our society. What do you think? What are the sources of greenhouse gases?
The cars we're driving and the water waste and all the trash we don't care where we're throwing it, that's what I think.
Cars, buses.
It's industry, it's gasoline, it's energy use.
All the fumes from
Cars, too many vehicles maybe.
Fumes in the air, all the gas and people driving in the city.
Cars, factories, planes.
I imagine the aviation industry hasn't helped.
I mean, one airplane can fly across country and it's like 40 tons of carbon. 40 tons, that's a lot.
I think in one word, I would say pollution.
Coal power stations, gas power stations.
People using more energy than they need to.
We are wasting a lot.
An excessive use of gases.
And also coal burning stations, especially in China.
All the pollutants that we pump into the air day after day.
Everyone says the same thing. It's the cars, the planes, the industrial plants. It's because we leave our lights on and take long showers. Always the same familiar answers. And, well, yes, of course it's true. But no one has yet won the grand prize. Because we're forgetting one extremely important factor. 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions are caused by livestock farming. That might surprise you. Farmed animals, 18%. And guess what percentage of total global emissions are caused by transport? 13%. Just think. All the cars, tractors, trucks, ships and planes in the world added together emit fewer greenhouse gases than livestock farming.
Oh, really? Wow, I thought it was mostly cars. Wow.
Wow.
livestock.
That's crazy. So more than the cars.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
That's insane.
No, I did not know that. No.
That's news to me. I've never heard that.
I'd never heard the livestock connection, no.
Well, I knew there was some. I had no idea it was that extensive.
How does it come from livestock exactly?
What do you call cow farts? What do you call that?
Okay.
Yeah, the methane gas coming from the cows. Yeah.
It's cow shit, right? Doesn't cow poop? It's what the emissions, right?
I thought it was just fat people in the South here in America, but no, apparently it's cattle as well.
It's quite worrying.
Okay. But I saw an article that say because the cow, what they fast, and then actually the fasting make the global warming. Yeah.
But how can it be that farm animals place a heavier burden on the environment than the entire transport sector worldwide? Well, actually, it's rather simple.
Once upon a time, a farmer was someone who owned land and some animals.
Nice and quiet around here.
If there was more land, then he bought some more pigs, a few chickens, and some cows.
Well, that's a fine kettle of fish.
You know what? All that grubbing around outside takes far too long. We're going to fatten you up and fast. It's not a fairy tale storybook. You're there to be eaten.
Not sure that's such a compliment, really.
We'll squeeze you all together nice and efficiently, and you'll all get sick right away.
You're telling me.
Listen, Piggy, I'm not interested in your personal vision right now. In the Netherlands alone, you lot produce 70 billion kilos of dung. Do you know how bad that is for the environment and the climate?
Sorry for living.
Did you know that cows of all farm animals are the largest producers of greenhouse gases, mostly through all that belching and farting? Do you know what the problem is? You're eating us out of house and home.
Who was just so pleased about fattening us up?
But all that food has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? So we destroy the rainforests and plant soya crops instead. But the rainforests are really important for the absorption of carbon dioxide. And then we spray the stuff with pesticides and we ship the soya off to Europe where it ends up in your feeding troughs. So well organized. What are you people up to?
Well, that's not our fault. Who actually wants to eat meat anyway?
The consumer, okay? Is there something wrong with that?
Well, that's a good question. Who actually eats so much meat? Eating meat is a luxury that we've got all rather too used to. Don't dare touch our steaks. Keep your hands off our barbecues. But once it becomes clear that all this meat is making a major contribution to the destruction of our Earth, shouldn't we think again? And yes, I hear some of you thinking, here we go again, yet another vegetarian fanatic. But I'm certainly not the only one who's worried about this issue.
I'm farm manager. We farm 1,000 hectares of land in mid Wales. We have around 800 head of cattle, including 550 dairy cows. We have 3,000 head of sheep, and we grow some arable crops. We can't deny as farmers, as agriculturists, that methane produced by cows contributes to global warming.
I'm David Davis. I work at the Institute of Biological, Environmental and Rural Sciences at Aberystwyth University. Cows have a very complex digestive tract, more complex than humans. Within their stomach, they are able to digest plant fibre, and humans cannot. To do that, they need a very complex mix of bacteria and fungi and protozoa within their digestive system. Now, these microorganisms do not have access to oxygen, and the food that we eat as people gets converted into carbon dioxide and water. Because ruminants in the rumen don't have access to oxygen, they need to produce a different range of end products. And one of the key ones from the rumen is methane. When you compare with carbon dioxide, methane is 21 times more potent.
The cow eats the feed in front of it, and it goes into its stomach, and as a result of that, the cow burps a lot. And this gas, which is produced when the animal burps, is one of the gases linked to warming and the greenhouse effect.
Every cow and every ruminant regurgitates its food into the mouth to chew, and this enables the microorganisms in the stomach to actually get better access to that feed. And whilst they're regurgitating it, they're actually releasing methane. So every time the cud, as it's called, comes into the mouth, a small amount of gas will also be released, and this will contain a large proportion of methane.
No, we don't notice anything about it because it's just a natural process which occurs in all ruminants.
The dairy cow that's producing 8,000 to 10,000 litres of milk every year will produce around 500 to 700 litres of methane every day. So your average cow will produce around 700 litres of methane per day. This is equivalent to the amount of greenhouse gas CO2 emissions produced by a big 4x4 vehicle travelling around 35 miles per day.
The ruminant population within the world is probably growing, and it has to grow in line with the growth in population in order to feed that population. I think it should concern everybody.
In 2006, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the FAO, published an important report which first brought the link between livestock farming and climate change to light. I'm now going to speak to Dr. Henning Steinfeld, the chief author of this report. Dr. Steinfeld, you have calculated that livestock farming is responsible for 18% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's quite a lot.
In fact, 18% is quite a lot. It has to do with the fact that in this assessment we took into account all the changes in land use that are related to livestock, the production of animals in terms of methane, the manure management in terms of also methane and nitrous oxides, and the various steps of the feed production, livestock production, processing, transport, and so on that have to do with livestock and feed commodities. And this is how you get to 18%.
Okay. How did you respond yourself when you were confronted with these figures?
I knew it was high. I knew also the impact on water and biodiversity was going to be very significant. I didn't expect it to be quite as high, but this is the figure we came up with.
And what do you think? What was the most shocking, amazing conclusion from your report?
Well, I think one of the issues is that this huge environmental impact that livestock have is not well understood by the public. It is not even well understood by the farmers themselves. So there is actually a strong case for regulating the livestock sector much more than is currently the case.
Thank you. Everyone is talking about global warming and trying to find out why it is happening. But how can it be that livestock farming is hardly ever mentioned as one of its causes? Certainly when more and more scientists have made the link between livestock farming and climate change.
It's not generally known, but between 40 and 50% of all cereals are not eaten by humans, but by livestock. And for soy, that's about 75%.
If you consider that it takes about 7 kilograms of grain, that's corn and soybeans, to just make 1 kilogram of beef, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hectares of soy being planted in former rainforest to provide meat.
That's not a very efficient way of producing protein food.
the soy is being imported from places like Brazil. Brazil has the biggest soy export market in the world, and their soy production has grown since the 1960s, something like 57 times. So they're just producing more soy than ever before. And most of that soy is being produced in very environmentally sensitive areas, including the Amazon rainforest and the Cerrado, which is a woodland savanna.
What can I say? It's a disaster. The main drawback is losing biodiversity, but indirectly it's also influencing climate change. It's speeding up the climate change that's already occurring.
Carbon sinks are places in the world like the rainforest or the Cerrado or some agricultural lands that soak up and sequester carbon. And when those are lost, we're losing a very important tool in the fight against global warming.
Today, there's nothing more important than trying to contain the problem of global warming. And to do that, we cannot afford not to pay attention to agriculture. If we want to just achieve a fairly conservative objective in this sector, which is to stop this sector adding more by the middle of the century, then we have to take quite radical steps, because the natural dynamic is that as populations get richer, they almost universally consume more animal products. In the global context at the moment, this argument really, in a way, focuses on China, because China is the biggest increaser in meat consumption. It's doubling every 10 years. The population of pigs and chickens in China is doubling every 10 years. These are monogastric animals. They don't create a greenhouse gas problem in terms of methane release, but they do create environmental problems because they have to be fed. And the feedstuffs have to come from global sources, and they come from soybean production in Brazil, which comes from deforestation and so on. If the rich countries keep on consuming at their high level, and countries like China come up to our high level, then the situation will be much worse, and that will make it very much more difficult to achieve global warming targets overall.
So it's rather strange that most governments only focus on quick fixes, like taxes on gas guzzlers. Certainly when you realize that research shows that in a year, a cow in the Netherlands will produce just as many greenhouse gas emissions as a car that drives 70,000 kilometers. 70,000 kilometers. This means driving around the globe more than 1.5 times. In a medium-sized car, I should add. The image we get to see of global warming is always so one-sided. We only get to see factory chimneys and traffic jams. Where are the public information campaigns about the relationship between carbon emissions and eating meat? I certainly haven't seen them yet in the Netherlands, despite the fact that we slaughter 500 million animals here each year. Animals, however, discover exactly what factory farming is very early on in their lives. Piglets, for example, are castrated without anesthetic. Their tails are docked, they are forced to live in dark concrete stalls, and usually only see daylight when they are taken to slaughter. It's not much different for other factory-farmed animals. Take laying hens, for example. They are crammed into battery cages, and their beaks are trimmed to stop them from pecking one another. Since 2006, I have represented the Party for the Animals in the Dutch Parliament, and I strive to put an end to these kind of practices. But my work doesn't just stop at animal welfare. It's only recently that the Dutch Environmental Agency has sounded the alarm at the speed at which we are exhausting the earth and its resources. the Netherlands uses 4 times its own surface area to produce what we consume. Think of it like a buffet. We are heaping up our plates with enough food to feed 4 people, which means that there will be not enough left for those at the back of the queue. 1 billion people on our planet suffer from obesity, while elsewhere 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night. Something is seriously askew, and we should really talk about it.
He is a really warm, generous, and caring person. And speaking of honors, it's a great honor to introduce him to you all tonight. Dr. Neil Bernard.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here. For those of you I haven't met, I haven't actually followed a healthy diet most of my life. I grew up in North Dakota, and my grandpa was busily raising cattle, and so was his father and his father and his father. And my father was in the cattle business, but he didn't like it very much, so he left and went to medical school and spent his life treating diabetes in Fargo. And I never once heard him say that a person with diabetes ever got better. And he always felt that people, where they would prescribe a diabetic diet, people didn't really want to follow it, and they didn't get much benefit, and it was just one-way street toward more and more complications and so forth. And that was my view of American medicine. And I have to say, we ate very much like we were in the cattle business. Every day of my life, it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn, except for special occasions when it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and peas. And the year before I went to medical school, I had sort of an eye-opening experience. I was an assistant in the morgue of the hospital. When somebody died in the hospital, maybe from eating hospital food, we would have to examine the body. And one day we had a guy who died of a massive heart attack, and the pathologist knew that I was going to go to medical school, so he said, "Neil, I want you to pay close attention." And he took what looked like a garden clipper, and he went crunch, crunch, crunch through the ribs on one side of the chest, and then he went crunch, crunch through the ribs on the other side of the chest and yanked off the ribs and said, "Look at the coronary arteries." And he explained to me they're called coronary arteries because they crown the heart. And he took a scalpel and he sliced one open and he said, "Look inside." And instead of it being a wide open artery, it was clogged with what looked like chewing gum. Except he had me feel it, and it was hard, and that was atherosclerosis. And we looked at the carotid arteries, and they had the same problem, and the arteries to the legs, the arteries to the kidneys. He said, "We see these in about 3/4 of people by age 23, which was the age that I was at the time. So anyway, at the end of the exam, he walked out, and I took the ribs off the table, and I put them back in the chest, tried to make them fit with the other ribs, and sewed up the skin and cleaned up. And went up to the cafeteria, where it turned out they were serving ribs for lunch. And I have to say, I didn't become a vegetarian on the spot, but I couldn't eat that. Between the look of it and the smell of it, it was to me a dead body. And anyway, you know how it is. You kind of stick your foot in it, and it becomes a black hole that sucks you in, and pretty soon you're a vegan. Now, I have to say, Americans are still eating a lot of this. And a lot of this, and a lot of this. And a year ago, I wrote an article in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition where I looked at the trends in the American diet over the last 100 years. And I just want to walk you through it. In 1909, the USDA started keeping track of what Americans eat. And in 1909, your average person ate 123.9 pounds of meat in a year. One person per year. But what happened? Well, we've been going up and up and up, and as of about 2007, we were over 200 pounds every person every year. Well, where are we putting 75 pounds extra meat this year, next year, next year, next year? Well, it's mostly chicken is the big increase. Beef is falling a little bit, but chicken is increasing. Americans now eat more than 1 million chickens per hour. It's about 10 billion per year because we think it's health food, and we're in the worst shape that we've ever been in. Let me say a special word of condemnation for cheese. Back in 1909, your average person ate 3.8 pounds of cheese in a year. But right around the 1960s, fast food chains came in. And any bun is a perfect place to stick a little slice of cheese under it. So a couple ounces of cheese would go on every fast food sandwich. And then pizza, which was not our thing back in 1909, became very popular. And you can connect your home to a restaurant with a telephone wire, and you can have dinner in 30 minutes. And kids will eat it, we can dump it in schools, the government starts promoting it, and pretty soon you've got Americans eating more than 30 pounds of cheese as of about 2005. As of 2011, your average American in a year's time eats about 34 pounds of cheese. Now, I'm not eating any, somebody else is getting mine. So it's bad enough that your average person is eating 30 pounds more cheese every single year compared to a century ago. But it's 70% fat. It's not good fat. It's saturated fat, bad fat. And it's 70%. If it was any worse, it would be Vaseline. And that's what people are eating and feeding to their children. Now, this will not be on the test, but the blue line is sugar, cane sugar and beet sugar. That's falling. But we are more than making up for it with high fructose corn syrup. That's the green line. You add it all together and you get, the red line is total sugar, and that's going up 30 or 40 pounds. So why are Americans overweight? I don't know. I guess we're not exercising enough. No, it's none of that. It's because we're eating 75 pounds more meat, 30 pounds more cheese, 30, 40, 50 pounds more sugar, every person this year, next year, the year after that, and we're feeding the same thing to our kids. It's all on the input side of the equation. And if you look at diabetes, this is back 1994, and there's North Dakota, where I grew up, and less than 4% of the population had diabetes. Here's Louisiana, Mississippi, more than 6%. But as the years go by, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, diabetes has just come right in dramatically. In 2006, we needed new colors for some political reason, but the map continues to change. So you don't see it just from one year to the next. But if you step back, you discover that we are on completely uncharted territory. We have never, as a country, had such a bad diet for so many people with such high rates of obesity and diabetes. Last year in America, we spent $120 billion just on medical treatment for diabetes. Well, anyway, I'm depressing myself. All right, but there is a better way. Researchers have said, who does better? And they've been very fond of studying Seventh-day Adventists. Now, I didn't know anything about the Adventist religion, but when I got to medical school, I noticed that people like to study them a lot. And the reason is that Adventists are supposed to not smoke, not drink alcohol, avoid caffeine, and not eat meat. And almost all Adventists are really good at the first three of those things. But some of them eat meat, some don't. So in 2009, the American Diabetes Association published this figure, where they looked at body mass index. And everybody's familiar with BMI, right? Should be below 25 to be healthy. It's your weight adjusted for your height. And the first group here are non-vegetarians, meat eaters. And they're not so healthy. They're at 28.8. That's in the overweight range. And the second group is semi-vegetarians. They eat meat no more than once a week. They're a little bit thinner. And then you have pesco-vegetarians. What's that? That's fish, but they don't eat any meat at all except for fish. And they're a little skinnier. And then lacto-ovo-vegetarians. They're a little thinner. And then here's this group of vegans out here, and that's the only group where they're smack in the middle of the healthy weight range. Now, the reason the American Diabetes Association published this was not because of the weight, it was because of diabetes. And it's exactly the same graph, where the meat eaters have the most, the vegans have the least, and the other groups just slot in. And if you think about it in reverse, let's say you're following a diet with whole grains and beans and vegetables and fruits, and you decide, let me have an egg, a little bit of milk. Well, you're more likely to gain weight, and your diabetes inches up. Your diabetes risk inches up. How about some fish? Your weight goes up again, your diabetes risk takes a jump. How about meat? But not too often. Your waist goes up, your waistline goes up, and your diabetes risk goes up. And how about if you have meat every day? Well, then you're like average Americans. High risk for overweight, high risk for diabetes. So you don't have to be Adventist, you could be European. And the EPIC trial found exactly the same gradient. This is men, this is women. The vegans are the thinnest, the meat eaters are the heaviest, and the other groups just slot in. So my research team said, fine, let's introduce a diet like this for people who have never thought about going on a vegan diet before. We brought in 64 women. They were all overweight. They were all over the age of menopause. Every one of them had been on Atkins, South Beach, Jenny Craig, and so forth. And they had lost weight, but then it would come back. They would try a different diet, and they were on this kind of yo-yo thing. What we asked them to do was this: eat fruits and grains and legumes and vegetables, and not to limit their portions. We also asked them not to exercise and to not use a lot of oil. So the only food rules were vegan, low fat. We didn't want them to exercise. Exercise is good, but this is a scientific study of diet, and we didn't want to confound her. And it was 14 weeks. And a typical day's meals would be, let me see, something like blueberry pancakes, maybe oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins, half cantaloupe, rye toast, no butter. The foods that you're all familiar with. There were no portion sizes. They were free to eat as much as they wanted to. And I have to say, there are sometimes humiliations in the life of a researcher. We had every week, everybody would get together as a discussion group, so they could share their successes and they could share their challenges and kind of support each other. And I think it was week 3, one of the women came in and said, Dr. Barnard, I found a treat that I can have on your low-fat vegan diet. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, what is this? And she opens her purse and she pulls out a pack of Twizzlers. You know Twizzlers? Sell them at the 7-Eleven. It's true. You look at the label, there's no animal products in them. There's no added oil. It's just sugary, starchy, artificially colored junk. And she made sure that all my research participants knew you can have all the Twizzlers you want on this diet. So my vegan, low-fat, Twizzler-fueled research participants set off on their path to the unknown. And as fate would have it, they lost about 13 pounds in 14 weeks. We tracked them a year later and then 2 years later, and they were skinnier at 2 years than at 1 year. They were skinnier at 1 year than at the beginning. In other words, unlike every other diet they'd ever been on, it was a one-way street. And their waists got thinner. And let me put a human face on this. This is Nancy. Nancy lost about 40 pounds over about a year's time. And she had diabetes. She stopped her diabetes medication. She was in better control on nothing than she was on medicine. And one day she came into the center to tell me about her cooking spaghetti. She had been home cooking spaghetti, and she cracked open a jar of spaghetti sauce and she poured it in the pan, and she just stopped. She set the jar down. She looked at her hands. She had rheumatoid arthritis. And any of you who have rheumatoid arthritis, you know it starts at the base of your thumbs, and it spreads to the other joints, and whoever is making those vacuum-packed jars, they are obviously a sadist, because you cannot open them up. And she realized her pain had just gone away, and she wanted to know why this was. And I mentioned to her that I'd written a book back more than 10 years ago called Foods That Fight Pain, because we found that the inflammation in the joints is caused by, in many cases, a foreign protein that elicits a reaction in the body. It causes the inflammation, that's the pain. You take that foreign protein out, you get better. Dairy is the most common. It's not the only one, there are others, but it's the most common. Bingo, she had no more pain. And maybe 50, 60, 70% of people with classic rheumatoid arthritis improve, or it just flat out goes away. So if you want to have a person really stick with your diet, cure their pain, make their symptoms go away. This is Vance. Vance was a policeman in Washington. His father was dead at age 30. Vance was 31 when he was diagnosed with diabetes. He was in his late 30s when he came in to see us. Lost 60 pounds over a year, stopped his diabetes medications. His diabetes became undetectable, which is something his personal physician had never ever seen before. And when I was asking Vance his permission to tell his story and to share it with other people, he said, make sure you tell everybody that my erectile dysfunction went away too. So how does it work? Why do you lose weight with this kind of diet? The first thing is a complete no-brainer. If you're eating vegetables and fruits, they have fiber. Fiber fills you up, holds water, doesn't have much in the way of calories, so you're full. And so all of these foods tend to be filling with very few calories. But Velveeta is not from a plant, it's from an animal, it doesn't have any fiber. Every last calorie in it, and every last calorie in an egg, every last calorie in chicken or turkey or beef, you get full advantage of it, so to speak. The second thing, though, is that you burn calories faster. We measure metabolism. The patient lies down on an exam table, and you put a little canopy over their head and shoulders, and you measure how much oxygen their body is using minute by minute, and how much carbon dioxide they're putting out. And you can measure their metabolism. Then you feed them a meal, and their metabolism goes up for about 3 hours after the meal, and you measure it. Except when they go vegan, you bring them back a couple months later, lie them down on the table, measure their metabolism, and feed them exactly the same meal. And what you find is that whole curve rises. They are suddenly burning calories faster than they were before. Not a lot, it's about 16% faster in the 3 hours after the meal. And so why are vegans skinny? It's because they're full sooner from all the fiber that they're eating, and they're burning calories faster for 3 hours after breakfast, 3 hours after lunch, 3 hours after dinner. It's automatic. You don't have to, nobody here is like starving and pushing away and thinking, I've really got to exercise extra tonight. None of that happens. The foods do it for you. And here is why. I'm going to stick a needle in your leg and pull out a muscle cell. Your muscles are your big calorie burners. And that muscle cell has a magical thing inside and another one. Those are mitochondria. Remember mitochondria from high school biology? Those are the burners inside your cell. They take fats and sugars and turn them into energy. And you've got a lot of them. The problem is there's something else there. There's fat. And that fat is growing inside your cell. Now, doctors don't like words like fat because it only has one syllable. So we're going to refer to it as it's intramyocellular lipid. But what it is, it's fat inside your cells. And how did it get there? It got there from eating beef, or eating chicken, or eating cheese, or olive oil, or fryer grease, or with almost no change. It goes from your digestive tract into your bloodstream, packs into your cells, and this is going to be on the test. This is very important. When your cell detects this bit of fat and it goes inside, your cell says, fantastic, that's great. I need this. Because your body was designed back when there were famines. And your body then stores that fat. And to store it, in case there is a famine, your body shuts down the production of mitochondria. And you could start a fatty diet on Monday. By Wednesday, you have fewer functioning mitochondria. In other words, you can't burn calories anymore. And have you heard people say, when I was 16, I could eat anything? But something's been happening. My metabolism is slowing down. I guess I'm just getting older. We are accidentally shutting down our own metabolism meal by meal by eating fatty animal-based foods. Your body is trying to store that in case there's a famine. You can reason with your body and say, I promise you, there's going to be extra food coming very soon, but your body is continuing to store it, and that's what happens. So, fat, are you all with me? Yeah. Okay, is this making sense? All right, so fat in your cells slows down your calorie burn, so it's ruining your metabolism. So what you need to do is the opposite. Get the animal products off your plate. How much animal fat is there left? None. Keep the oils kind of low. Don't take that bottle of olive oil and go glug, 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 all over your pasta. If you keep the oils low, it drains out of your cells. It's very quick. Okay? So, getting the fat out of your cells boosts your after-meal calorie burn. Let me share with you how we've applied this to diabetes. In 2003, NIH gave us a grant to test a vegan diet for diabetes, and it worked great. And diabetes is not caused by eating rice, or by eating bread, or by eating potatoes, or even by eating sugar. What it's caused by is fat builds up in the cell. And as fat builds up in the cell, this insulin which is a key that goes into this lock, and it signals inside the cell to open these little channels and let sugar inside. When you've got too much gum in your lock, your key doesn't work anymore. If If you got too much fat in your cells, insulin doesn't work anymore. Fat inside cells causes insulin resistance. All you do, vegan diet, there's no animal fat, keep the oils really low, that drains out, your insulin works again, person gets better. Very simple. Now, if I can get to you as soon as you've been diagnosed, we're going to do well. If I get to you after you've had it for 20 years or 30 years, it's harder, but people improve. I had a man who had diabetes 19 years. He was on insulin 3 times a day, and he not only had high blood sugars, but he had a late complication called painful neuropathy. Every night his feet were killing him because the nerves are being attacked by the disease process. And it doesn't just affect your body. Every doctor who's been treating people with diabetes, you know it affects your mind. You start realizing, I'm not living. You're losing ground year by year. And it took about 4 or 5 months. On a vegan diet, his neuropathy went away. And I said, it's better, right? He said, no, that's not what I said. It is gone. And I kept following him for years. It never came back. And I had never seen this before. And I started looking into it, and it happens all the time. And when your body starts recovering, just like the people that you saw in the video that Jeff showed, you're living again. And I turned to Jeff as we were watching that. I thought, the terrible thing is that these people had to live for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years with all of these symptoms and all of these medications, thinking that that was the best that they could do. So anyway.